Syl drove his claws into the den's threshold and willed the stone to belong to him before the enormous thing below reached it. Den-bound scents flared through the chamber, mapping cracks, vents, and one narrow escape shaft. But his torn flank buckled, his veil flickered, and his body remained scarcely larger than a hunting cat. Behind him, the wounded stranger shielded the child. If Syl lost this refuge, all three would die. If the ancient predator's pressure forced a corrupted evolution, death might be the kinder end. A tremor climbed the black tunnel. Dust sifted from the arch. The dim fungus withdrew its glow as if darkness itself had frightened it. Syl felt the intruder through the floor, a dragging bulk, a pause, then a wet impact that made the walls pulse. Not footsteps, a hop. His monster instincts answered with a surge of territorial fury. Mine, den, meet below. The hunger behind those thoughts thrilled him, and that thrill sickened the human remnant still clinging to his name. Back wall, the stranger whispered. Syl snapped his head toward him, lips peeling from needle teeth. The man froze. The child did not. Small fingers caught in the fur along Syl's shoulder, trusting him with the terrible simplicity of someone too exhausted to fear correctly. Another impact struck the tunnel, closer. Syl forced himself not to bite the hand away. Den-bound scents showed the escape shaft behind a curtain of mineral roots, but it narrowed after 12 body lengths. Syl could pass. The child might. The stranger, broad-shouldered even while starved, would wedge fast. The practical answer came from ambush instinct. Abandon the slow one, veil the child, flee. The territorial answer was worse. Keep every living thing inside his boundary, because possession mattered more than mercy. Syl chose neither. He slashed the mineral roots apart and shoved the child toward the opening. Then he pointed one hooked claw at the stranger, dragged it across his own throat and jabbed toward the lower tunnel. Be silent, or it kills us. Understanding sharpened the man's face. He lifted the child into the shaft and followed only far enough to clear the chamber, leaving his legs near the opening. Not safe, but hidden. Syl turned toward the threshold. His wounds protested as he flattened himself against the wall. Stealth veil eye crawled across his hide, bending the fungus's last gray shimmer around him. The veil could conceal shape, not blood. 3 dark drops had already marked the floor. The tunnel inhaled. A rope of pale flesh snapped from the darkness, struck the first drop and vanished with a crack louder than bone breaking. Syl recoiled despite himself. A tongue. The ancient predator hopped into the lower bend, and its head filled the passage. It resembled a cave toad only in the cruelest sense. Lidless eyes filmed with mineral crust, jaws wide enough to swallow Syl whole, forelimbs ending in digging hooks. Black nodules pulsed under its skin. Each pulse sent pressure through the den and made Syl's unfinished evolution throb in answer. Hollow stalker, burrow tyrant. The paths flashed through him, no longer invitations but wounds waiting to split open. The toad's corruptive presence tugged at the second path, promising mass, armor, dominion. Syl's shoulders cramped. Bone pressed outward beneath his skin. No. He bit down on his own foreleg until pain cleared the hunger. Choosing evolution under that pressure would make the choice partly the toad's. The predator's tongue lashed again. Syl moved before thought. He sprang above it, claws catching the tunnel roof. The tongue struck stone, recoiled, and dragged his blood sent directly into the creature's mouth. Both crusted eyes rolled upward. His veil vanished. The toad lunged, jaws spreading wall to wall. Syl kicked free, crossed its snout, and raked one mineral eye. His claws skittered without piercing, but the blow turned its head. Its hooked forelimb smashed through the threshold where Syl had been, breaking the arch and opening a crack den-bound sense had shown him moments before. Cold air burst from inside the wall, a hidden channel. The collapse also split the chamber floor beneath the stranger. Stone dropped. The man slipped from the shaft, caught the edge with one hand, and dangled above the toad's opening. The child seized his wrist, too light to hold him for more than a breath. Syl landed between the predator and his claimed den. The cracked wall breathed against his whiskers, carrying the scent of water, old bones and many smaller creatures fleeing deeper within. An escape route, or another occupied territory. Behind him, the stranger's fingers began to slide. Before him, the ancient toad lowered its ruined eye and gathered itself for a hop that would crush the threshold, the den, and everyone inside. Syl crouched, spread his blood-slick claws, and drove his awareness into the broken stone, searching for something he could turn into a weapon before the monster left him nothing to defend. Syl's claws scraped through grit and found an iron spike wedged beneath the broken stone. Not a weapon. Too short, too rusted. A hinge pin, perhaps, left behind when the den had still belonged to hands that built doors instead of creatures that marked walls with blood. But the slab above it shifted when he pulled. A lever. The toad's throat swelled. Its hooked tongue tightened around the stranger's ankle, lifting him until his fingers dragged uselessly across the floor. Around the beast's neck, a collar of blackened copper cut deep into warty flesh. 5 tally notches gleamed beneath layers of slime. Ranked then, proven. A claimant, not a wandering feeder, its hind legs compressed. Den-bound scent spread through Syl's paws. Every crack became a nerve. Every buried stone pressed against his awareness. He felt the hollow beneath the tilted slab, the weakened rib of masonry supporting the ceiling, and the child curled in the rear crevice with both hands clamped over her mouth. He also felt the line of the toad's leap, straight through him, straight into her hiding place. Syl yanked the pin free and rammed it beneath the slab. Pain split one foreclaw as the rusted iron tore under the nail. He shoved anyway. Stone ground against stone. The toad launched. Stealth veil folded over Syl, smothering scent and outline. He did not flee. Ambush instinct seized the instant when the creature's bulk left the earth and could no longer correct itself. Syl threw his weight onto the lever. The slab tipped. Its edge struck the toad's foreleg in midair. Bone cracked, turning the leap sideways. The monster slammed into a supporting pillar instead of the rear crevice. The whole den convulsed. Dust burst from the ceiling. The stranger dropped, then jerked short as the tongue's hooks held fast. Syl's first sensation was triumph. It had entered his den. He had broken it with his den. The thought tasted so good that horror followed a heartbeat later. Burrow tyrant pulsed behind his eyes, not words but appetite. Deepen the tunnels, seal the exits, cripple intruders, keep living meat. The toad's corruptive pressure fed the path until Syl's shoulders burned. New muscle tried to knot beneath his skin. His forelimbs thickened unevenly, stretching joints that were not ready. One claw split down the middle. He could let it happen. Become heavy enough to pin the beast. Strong enough that nothing would take the child from him. Strong enough to make her fear him. Syl rejected the path. Agony folded him. The swelling muscle collapsed, leaving his forelegs trembling and his chest raw as if something had raked him from within. The toad recovered faster. It hauled on its tongue, dragging the stranger toward its mouth while its ruined leg twitched behind it. Saving the man was wasteful. Worse, dangerous. Cut the tongue and the toad would turn fully on Syl. The child made a tiny sound from the darkness. The stranger heard it. Instead of begging, he twisted around and drove both hands into a loose stone, anchoring himself so his body blocked the crevice. Choice made. Syl poured himself into the pillar's shadow. Stealth veil blurred him, but shadow gave the blur direction. He slipped beneath the toad's swollen belly, close enough to feel corruption throb through its skin. Its tongue flexed above him. Hooks opened and closed in the stranger's flesh. Syl sprang and caught the tongue with both foreclaws. The membrane was tougher than hide. His first slash skidded. The second sank shallowly. The toad snapped its mouth shut, wrenching Syl off his feet. He clung as the tongue reeled in, claws ripping longer channels while his injured forelimbs screamed. Then the stranger released the stone and dropped his full weight backward. The tongue stretched taut. Syl bit. Hot essence flooded his mouth before the flesh parted, ranked, territorial, ancient with mud and hunger. Burrow tyrant surged again, offering armor hooks, a throat that could swallow prey whole. He tore free and spat the severed strip into the dust. The toad shrieked. Its tongue recoiled in ribbons, releasing the stranger, but the rejected essence did not vanish. It crawled across the floor like oily green fire, searching for another host. Searching toward the child's crevice. Syl landed on his ruined claw as the ceiling gave a warning crack. The toad crouched beneath the failing pillar, one eye fixed on him, while the stranger lunged for the spreading essence. Syl had one breath to choose whether to collapse the den on his enemy or cross open ground and stop the man from touching it. I spent that breath biting down. The toad's tongue convulsed between my teeth. Bitter slime flooded my mouth, followed by hot essence that struck harder than blood. It carried hunger without thought, the certainty that anything smaller existed to be swallowed. My jaws wanted to open. My body wanted to welcome it, to let that brutal simplicity scour away fear, memory, and choice. I clamped harder until the tongue split. The toad recoiled and I went with it. My foreclaw stayed hooked around the lever. Pain tore through my shoulder as I was dragged across the stone, but the lever moved one finger's width, then another. Above us, the cracked support gave a warning groan. The toad understood too late. Its remaining eye rolled toward the ceiling. Its throat ballooned, and the essence it had been drawing from the child surged through the pale thread between them. If I collapsed the chamber now, the stone would crush the thread, but it might crush the humans too. If I did nothing, the toad would drink the child hollow. There was a third choice, a disgusting one. I twisted my head and swallowed the essence trapped in the severed tongue. Cold fire punched through my chest, my limbs locked. For one instant I felt the child at the other end of the current. Small heart stuttering, terror buried beneath unnatural sleep. Behind that terror was something placed there deliberately, a knot of silver light under the ribs. Not prey, not an accident, a seal. One of the adult humans had hidden power inside the child and the toad had been trying to reach it. I pulled. The current reversed. Essence ripped out of the toad through its wounded tongue and into me. Its skin sagged. Its swollen body collapsed inward while my own flesh crawled beneath my hide. A translucent film spread from my jaw down my throat, slick and cold. The den vanished from sight. No, not vanished. It unfolded inside me. Every tunnel became pressure against my skin. Every loose stone was an ache in my bones. I felt the humans behind the fallen slab, the child's faint pulse, the adult's hand moving beneath a cloak. I felt roots clutching soil above us. I even felt something vast shift beyond the far wall, disturbed by the flood of stolen essence. Den-bound sense had crossed a threshold, and the den was no longer the boundary. The toad tore free, leaving half its tongue in my mouth. It lunged toward the child on raw instinct. I drove the lever down. The support snapped. Stone thundered between us. The roof did not collapse all at once. It folded along the fractures I had mapped, dropping a wall of rubble across the toad's forelegs and pinning its skull sideways. Dust erased everything. The adult human threw themselves over the child as fragments battered the chamber. The toad screamed once. I found its heart through the stone without seeing it. One pulse. Two. I struck through a gap. The third never came. Silence followed, heavy and imperfect. The child still lived. So did I, though my right shoulder hung uselessly and the new membrane in my throat kept flexing as if tasting the air. Dark patterns spread across my forelimbs, breaking up their outline against the rubble. When I held still, even I struggled to see where my body ended. A path pressed against my thoughts, devourer of wells. It promised a stronger tongue, essence theft, and the right to hollow living vessels from afar. Accepting would stabilize what I had swallowed. I rejected it. The stolen power turned barbed. Something tore loose behind my eyes. A human memory, warm bread broken by familiar hands, flared, then vanished so completely that only the grief of losing it remained. The silver seal inside the child awakened. Light burst through the rubble. The adult rose, no longer pretending helplessness, one hand blazing with the same mark. Their gaze passed through my veil and fixed exactly on me. Beyond the far wall, the vast thing began digging toward us. The human lifted a blade. "Monster," they whispered, as the child opened silver eyes. Choose which side of this threshold you're on. The adult's blade caught the light leaking from the child's eyes and turned it into a hard white edge. Syl tasted the air through the new membrane and felt the silver not inside the girl pull at his stolen essence like a hook in living meat. The vast thing beyond the wall dug faster now, each scrape sending tremors through the rubble that pinned the toad's corpse. Syl's right shoulder screamed when he tried to rise. The dark patterns on his forelimbs shifted, trying to match the stone, but the motion cost him focus. Denbound's sense had become a curse as much as a gift. He felt every loose rock above them, every root straining, every heartbeat in the chamber and the one slow pulse still leaking from the buried toad. He also felt the adult's intent. Not fear, not rage, but cold calculation. The blade was not for the monster in front of him. It was for whatever the child became if the seal finished breaking. The child sat up. Silver light bled from her eyes and mouth in thin threads that did not obey gravity. She looked at Syl without blinking. "It hurts," she said in a voice too steady for a child. "The big one wants the rest of me." The stranger, no, the man who was not a stranger anymore, pushed himself between them, one hand still glowing with the same mark. "She was supposed to stay asleep until we reached the old places. You woke the seal when you took the toad's claim." Syl's instincts screamed to veil and strike. The man was wounded, off balance, the child small and leaking power that tasted like the essence he had just swallowed. One clean lunge would end both threats. His body coiled. The new membrane in his throat flexed, tasting the silver as if it were prey. Instead he spoke, the words rough and half-growled. "The toad was taking her. I stopped it. Your den or mine." The man's blade did not lower. "You are the den now. The paths remember what you claimed. If you leave, the big one follows the scent you left in the stone. If you stay, you finish what the toad started." Behind the man, the child's light brightened. A second silver thread reached toward Syl, not attacking, tasting. It brushed the film across his throat and recoiled, but not before he felt what it was. A lock, a prison, a promise. Someone had put the power in her to keep it from the things that lived in the dark. The toad had been one lock pick. The vast digger was another. Syl made the choice before the thought finished forming. He stepped sideways, not toward the humans, but toward the rubble wall where the toad's body still twitched in death. His good foreclaw found the collar of blackened copper and tore it free. The notches on it burned cold against his pad. 5 claims, 5 territories taken. The 6th notch was empty, waiting. He pressed the collar against the stone where the toad's blood had soaked deepest and drove one claw through the empty notch into the rock. The den's sense answered with a flare of pain and recognition. The collar accepted the claim. The notch filled with a dark line that matched the patterns now crawling his limbs. New trait stabilized, threshold warden, cost registered, one human memory fragment permanently lost. One future evolution path narrowed. The silver thread from the child snapped back into her chest. She gasped and the light dimmed to embers. The adult lowered the blade a fraction, eyes narrowing. "You claimed it," the man said. "The threshold answers to you now. The digger will have to go through you to reach her." Syl felt the truth of it in every stone. The den was no longer just shelter. It was a boundary he had made his. Anything that crossed it would pay in flesh or essence. The vast thing beyond the wall slowed its digging, as if tasting the new rule. But boundaries cut both ways. The child looked at him with eyes that were still too old. "You're not like the others that took, but you're not like us either." Syl's stomach turned at the word us. He had no us left. Only this den, this collar biting his claw, and the 2 warm bodies that had become part of its defense whether he wanted them or not. A low grinding sound rolled through the far wall. Not digging. Something large settling into a patient wait. Syl turned his head toward the sound, veil flickering across his ruined shoulder. The patterns on his limbs had settled into a broken stone camouflage that would hold only while he remained still. Movement would cost him the concealment. The man sheathed the blade but did not relax. "We can't stay. The seal is cracked. More will come. If you keep the threshold, you keep the hunt that follows it. Syl tasted the air again. The silver inside the child was quieter now, but not gone. It hummed against his new sense like a second heartbeat that did not belong to him. If he left the humans, the digger or something worse would take the rest. If he stayed, he became the thing between the child and the dark. He had already chosen when he bit the tongue and claimed the collar. He lowered himself until his belly brushed the stone, the motion sending fresh agony through the shoulder. The veil wrapped him and the den at the same time. Through the shared sense he felt the child's small hand find the stranger's wrist, and the stranger's other hand close around the hilt of the blade again. Syl spoke once more, the words shaped around teeth that wanted to rend. Then we move, together, until the threshold says otherwise. The vast thing beyond the wall did not resume digging. It listened. Syl began to dig his own way out, one painful clawful of rubble at a time, the collar heavy on his forelimb, and the silver knot in the child pulling at the edges of what he had become. Behind him the den he had claimed settled into a new shape, its boundaries now his to hold or break. Somewhere above, the forest was still hunting. Somewhere below, older things had noticed the change. Syl did not look back. The den was his. The humans were his burden now. The next breath would decide which path the collar's empty notches would fill.